The Mummy, released in 1999, assembled a cast that perfectly balanced established performers with rising stars, creating a combination that helped transform the film into one of the biggest adventure blockbusters of its era. While spectacular visual effects and thrilling action certainly played a major role in the movie's success, the chemistry between the cast gave audiences memorable characters they genuinely cared about. The performances blended action, humor, romance, and suspense, allowing the film to stand apart from many other adventure movies of the decade. At the center of the story is Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell, a charming adventurer and former French Foreign Legion officer who becomes the unlikely hero of the film. Before starring in The Mummy, Fraser had already established himself as a versatile actor capable of handling both comedy and drama. During the early and mid-1990s he appeared in films such as Encino Man, School Ties, With Honors, Airheads, George of the Jungle, and Gods and Monsters. These roles demonstrated his ability to combine physical comedy with genuine emotional warmth. George of the Jungle especially showcased his athleticism and comedic timing, while Gods and Monsters proved he possessed dramatic depth beyond light-hearted entertainment. Rick O'Connell became the defining role of Fraser's career. Unlike many action heroes of the time, Rick was not portrayed as invincible. He frequently found himself in dangerous situations, often surviving through courage, quick thinking, and determination rather than overwhelming strength. Fraser performed many of his own stunts, adding authenticity to the action sequences. His natural charisma allowed him to move effortlessly between serious moments and humorous exchanges, making Rick feel relatable despite the extraordinary events surrounding him. Following the enormous success of The Mummy, Fraser became one of Hollywood's most recognizable leading men, returning for 2 successful sequels while also starring in films such as Bedazzled, Dudley Do-Right, Monkeybone, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and later earning widespread acclaim for dramatic performances that revived his career decades afterward. Rachel Weisz plays Evelyn Carnahan, an intelligent librarian with an extraordinary passion for ancient Egyptian history. Before joining The Mummy, Weisz had already gained attention for performances in films including Chain Reaction, Stealing Beauty, and The Land Girls. Although respected for her talent, she had not yet achieved mainstream international stardom. Evelyn allowed Weisz to demonstrate a rare combination of intelligence, vulnerability, humor, and bravery. Unlike many female characters in action films during the late 1990s, Evelyn is not simply a romantic interest waiting to be rescued. Her academic knowledge drives much of the story forward, as her understanding of ancient languages and Egyptian culture becomes essential to both awakening and ultimately defeating Imhotep. Weisz portrayed Evelyn with an infectious enthusiasm that made the character instantly lovable. She begins the story as somewhat clumsy and socially awkward but gradually develops into a courageous adventurer capable of facing terrifying supernatural dangers. Her chemistry with Brendan Fraser became one of the film's greatest strengths, creating a romance that felt natural instead of forced. Following The Mummy, Rachel Weisz experienced a significant rise in Hollywood, eventually starring in films such as Enemy at the Gates, About a Boy, Constantine, The Constant Gardener, The Fountain, The Favorite, Black Widow, and many other acclaimed productions. She eventually won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for The Constant Gardener, confirming the remarkable career that continued long after her breakthrough adventure role. Arnold Vosloo portrays Imhotep, the ancient Egyptian high priest whose forbidden love and horrifying resurrection set the entire story into motion. Before The Mummy, Vosloo had built a successful career in South African theatre and film before moving into American productions. He appeared in projects such as Hard Target and Darkman 2, but none brought him the worldwide recognition achieved through his portrayal of Imhotep. Playing the film's primary antagonist required a unique balance between terrifying monster and tragic romantic figure. Imhotep is undeniably ruthless, yet his motivation originates from a love story that stretches across thousands of years. Vosloo relied heavily on subtle facial expressions, calm confidence, and commanding screen presence instead of exaggerated villainy. Even beneath extensive makeup and digital effects, his performance remained emotionally convincing. As Imhotep gradually regenerates throughout the film, Vosloo shifts seamlessly from horrifying creature to charismatic human appearance, making the villain increasingly dangerous as the story progresses. His portrayal became one of the most memorable movie monsters of the late 1990s and remains closely associated with the franchise today. John Hannah plays Jonathan Carnahan, Evelyn's older brother and comic relief throughout the adventure. Before The Mummy, Hannah had gained international recognition through 4 weddings and a funeral and sliding doors. Jonathan could easily have become an irritating comic stereotype, but Hannah infused the character with enough charm and humanity to make audiences genuinely enjoy his presence. Although often motivated by greed and self-preservation, Jonathan repeatedly returns to help his sister and friends during moments of extreme danger. His witty dialogue, exaggerated reactions, and impeccable comic timing provided welcome relief between the film's more intense sequences. Jonathan's personality also helped emphasize one of the movie's central ideas: ordinary people can become heroes despite their flaws. Hannah's performance became so popular that he returned for both sequels, remaining one of the franchise's most beloved supporting characters. Kevin J. O'Connor portrays Benny Gabber, perhaps one of cinema's most entertaining cowardly villains. Before working on The Mummy, O'Connor had collaborated extensively with director Stephen Sommers in films such as Deep Rising. When The Mummy premiered in 1999, few expected it to become one of the defining adventure films of its generation. Released during a period when audiences were embracing large-scale action spectacles enhanced by rapidly improving visual effects, the movie successfully revived a classic Universal monster while transforming the traditional horror concept into an exciting blend of action, comedy, romance, fantasy, and supernatural adventure. More than 2 decades later, its influence continues to be felt across cinema, television, video games, literature, internet culture, and audience expectations for blockbuster entertainment. One of the film's greatest cultural achievements was its successful reinvention of the classic monster movie. The original 1932 version of The Mummy starring Boris Karloff was primarily a gothic horror film built around atmosphere, suspense, and tragedy. By contrast, the 1999 version embraced a completely different identity. Director Stephen Sommers combined elements inspired by classic adventure serials, treasure hunting stories, fantasy epics, horror films, and romantic comedies. Instead of replacing the original, the film demonstrated that beloved properties could be respectfully reimagined for modern audiences while preserving their core mythology. The movie arrived during a period when audiences were hungry for large-scale adventure stories. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, films such as Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, Romancing the Stone, and Jurassic Park had proven that action mixed with exploration could become global phenomena. The Mummy successfully captured that same spirit while introducing supernatural horror elements and modern computer-generated visual effects that made ancient Egypt feel alive in spectacular new ways. It reminded audiences that adventure films could be thrilling without becoming excessively dark or cynical. The film also reignited worldwide fascination with ancient Egypt. Although Egyptian history had always attracted public curiosity, The Mummy introduced an entirely new generation to concepts such as pharaohs, pyramids, hieroglyphics, mummies, curses, scarab beetles, sacred relics, temples, and archaeological expeditions. Museums reported renewed public interest in Egyptian exhibitions, bookstores experienced increased sales of books about Egyptian mythology, and documentaries exploring ancient civilizations found larger audiences. Many younger viewers first developed an interest in Egyptian history after watching the film, even if the movie itself took significant creative liberties with historical facts. Tourism also benefited indirectly from the renewed fascination with Egyptian culture. While The Mummy presented a highly fictionalized version of ancient Egypt, it inspired many travelers to visit real historical landmarks such as the Great Pyramids of Giza, the Valley of the Kings, Luxor, Karnak Temple, Abu Simbel, and the Egyptian Museum. Travel companies frequently referenced the excitement generated by adventure films when promoting cultural tourism to Egypt throughout the early 2000s. The movie significantly influenced the portrayal of female protagonists in action-adventure cinema. Evelyn Carnahan represented a refreshing departure from traditional stereotypes. She was highly educated, intellectually curious, and deeply knowledgeable about archaeology and ancient languages. Rather than existing solely as the hero's romantic interest, Evelyn's expertise repeatedly saves the group and drives major plot developments. Her transformation from reserved librarian to fearless explorer inspired many later adventure heroines who combined intelligence with bravery rather than relying exclusively on physical combat skills. Rick O'Connell also became a model for a different style of action hero. During the late 1990s, many action protagonists were portrayed as nearly unstoppable figures with minimal emotional vulnerability. Rick, however, balanced confidence with humor, fear, compassion, and occasional mistakes. Brendan Fraser's performance emphasized likability instead of intimidation. This more approachable style influenced numerous adventure protagonists who followed, demonstrating that audiences appreciated heroes who felt human rather than invincible. Another important contribution involved the blending of genres. The Mummy refused to remain confined within a single category. Horror fans enjoyed its monsters and supernatural curses. Adventure enthusiasts appreciated the treasure hunts and exotic locations. Comedy audiences embraced the witty dialogue and humorous character interactions. Romance viewers connected with Rick and Evelyn's growing relationship. Families found the film exciting without becoming overwhelmingly frightening. This broad appeal expanded its audience far beyond traditional horror fans and proved that blockbuster filmmaking could successfully combine multiple genres into a cohesive experience. The visual presentation of ancient mythology also influenced later fantasy and adventure productions. The film's depiction of resurrected mummies, magical plagues, cursed artifacts, and ancient rituals inspired countless movies, television series, comic books, and video games throughout the following decades. Elements such as sandstorms taking human form, armies of undead warriors, magical books containing forbidden knowledge, and hidden desert cities became recurring themes across entertainment media. Video game developers embraced many ideas popularized by the film. Adventure games increasingly featured archaeological settings, ancient curses, supernatural enemies, hidden temples, environmental puzzles, and historical mysteries. While treasure hunting games already existed, The Mummy reinforced the commercial appeal of combining exploration with fantasy and horror elements. Numerous action-adventure titles throughout the 2000s reflected similar atmospheres, featuring forgotten civilizations awakened by modern explorers. Behind every great adventure film lies an equally fascinating production story, and The Mummy is no exception. Released in 1999, the movie appears effortless on screen, but bringing its spectacular world to life required years of planning, innovative filmmaking techniques, demanding physical performances, complex visual effects, and extraordinary dedication from everyone involved. From dangerous desert conditions to groundbreaking digital effects, nearly every aspect of the production presented unique challenges that ultimately helped shape one of the most memorable adventure films of its generation. The project was directed by Stephen Sommers, who had already established himself as a filmmaker with a talent for combining adventure, fantasy, and humor. Before directing The Mummy, Sommers had worked on films such as The Jungle Book and Deep Rising. Although Deep Rising did not become a major box office success, Universal Pictures recognized Sommers' ability to create energetic action sequences while balancing suspense and comedy. Instead of producing a straightforward horror remake of the original 1932 classic, Sommers envisioned something entirely different. His goal was to create a modern adventure inspired by classic serials, combining the excitement of Indiana Jones with supernatural horror and old-fashioned swashbuckling entertainment. Universal executives initially debated what direction the remake should take. Earlier attempts focused on creating a darker horror film closer to the original Boris Karloff version. Sommers convinced the studio that audiences would respond better to an exciting adventure that embraced humor alongside horror. His script transformed The Mummy into a fast-paced blockbuster while still respecting many of the original story's supernatural foundations. That creative decision ultimately became one of the movie's greatest strengths and helped distinguish it from other monster films of the era. Casting the lead role proved especially important. Brendan Fraser was selected because he possessed qualities rarely found in traditional action stars. Sommers wanted someone capable of delivering convincing action scenes while remaining funny, approachable, and genuinely likable. Fraser's previous performances demonstrated excellent physical comedy, athletic ability, and natural charm. During filming, he committed fully to the demanding role, performing many of his own stunts despite the physical risks involved. One of the production's most widely discussed stories involves a dangerous accident during the opening sequence. In the scene where Rick O'Connell is nearly executed by hanging, Brendan Fraser accidentally stopped breathing after the rope tightened around his neck more than expected. Crew members quickly intervened before serious injury occurred. Fraser later joked about the incident in interviews, but it served as a reminder of how physically demanding many practical stunts could become, even with experienced stunt coordinators supervising every sequence. Rachel Weisz also prepared extensively for her role as Evelyn Carnahan. Although much of Evelyn's expertise comes from dialogue about archaeology and ancient languages, Weisz wanted her performance to feel authentic. She researched Egyptian history and developed Evelyn's personality as someone whose intelligence often exceeded her practical experience. This contrast became one of the character's defining qualities. Evelyn begins as an academic who accidentally knocks over bookshelves and struggles outside the library, yet gradually evolves into a courageous explorer capable of surviving ancient curses and supernatural monsters. Arnold Vosloo faced perhaps the most demanding transformation of any actor in the production. Portraying Imhotep required extensive makeup sessions that often lasted several hours before filming could begin. Early versions of the resurrected mummy relied heavily on practical makeup appliances carefully applied by the makeup department. As Imhotep regenerated throughout the story, different stages of makeup reflected his gradual return to human form. The combination of practical prosthetics and digital enhancements allowed the character to evolve convincingly across the film without relying entirely on computer-generated imagery. The production took advantage of spectacular filming locations to create the illusion of ancient Egypt. Although much of the story takes place in Egypt, significant portions were actually filmed in Morocco. The vast deserts, rocky landscapes, and historic architecture provided convincing backdrops while offering greater logistical flexibility than many Egyptian locations. Additional scenes were filmed on elaborate studio sets built in England, where massive temple interiors, underground chambers, and ancient corridors could be carefully controlled and safely constructed. Creating the legendary city of Hamunaptra required an enormous amount of design work. Production designers combined historical inspiration with fantasy architecture, producing a city that felt ancient, mysterious, and visually unforgettable. Detailed concept art guided every stage of construction. Large sections of the city were physically built, while distant buildings and sweeping panoramic views were expanded through digital visual effects. This combination of practical construction and computer enhancement created environments that still appear impressive decades later. One of the greatest strengths of The Mummy is the way it constructs its narrative. Rather than relying solely on visual spectacle or action sequences, the film carefully balances mystery, adventure, horror, romance, and comedy within a structure that constantly pushes the story forward. Every major sequence introduces new information, raises the stakes, or develops the relationships between the characters. The pacing rarely slows down, ensuring that audiences remain invested from the opening scene until the final confrontation. While inspired by classic adventure serials, the film also incorporates modern storytelling techniques that make the narrative accessible to viewers of all ages. The story begins thousands of years before the main events of the film, immediately establishing the mythology that drives the entire narrative. The audience is introduced to ancient Egypt during the reign of Pharaoh Seti I. His trusted high priest, Imhotep, secretly falls in love with the pharaoh's mistress, Anck-su-namun. Their forbidden romance creates the central tragedy of the film. When their affair is discovered, Anck-su-namun kills the pharaoh before taking her own life, believing she can later be resurrected. Imhotep attempts to fulfill that promise by stealing her body and performing an ancient ritual at the legendary city of Hamunaptra. However, before the ritual can be completed, Imhotep is captured by the Medjay, an ancient order sworn to protect humanity from supernatural evil. As punishment, he is subjected to the terrifying Hom-Dai, considered the worst curse imaginable. Buried alive with flesh-eating scarab beetles, Imhotep is condemned to eternal suffering while retaining the possibility of resurrection should anyone ever disturb his tomb. This opening sequence immediately establishes the supernatural threat while providing emotional motivation for the villain. Imhotep is introduced not simply as an evil monster but as a tragic figure whose love ultimately leads to catastrophe. After this prologue, the narrative jumps forward to 1926, introducing an entirely different tone. Instead of ancient tragedy, audiences meet Evelyn Carnahan, a brilliant but somewhat clumsy librarian working at the Cairo Museum. This shift from epic historical drama to light-hearted adventure creates immediate contrast, while allowing the audience to gradually discover the mystery alongside the protagonists. Evelyn's fascination with ancient Egypt naturally draws viewers into the archaeological world without requiring excessive exposition. The introduction of Rick O'Connell serves as another important structural decision. Rather than presenting him as a conventional hero from the beginning, the film first reveals him as a prisoner awaiting execution. This unexpected introduction immediately raises questions about his past while also demonstrating his resilience and courage. Evelyn believes Rick knows the location of Hamunaptra because he previously survived an expedition there. Their unlikely partnership begins not through friendship but through mutual necessity, establishing one of the film's strongest relationships. Jonathan Carnahan, Evelyn's charming but irresponsible brother, provides another essential narrative function. His discovery of an ancient map acts as the catalyst that launches the central adventure. Instead of relying on coincidence alone, the screenplay carefully connects multiple characters through shared objectives. Evelyn seeks historical knowledge, Jonathan hopes for treasure, and Rick simply wants freedom. These different motivations naturally bring the group together while creating opportunities for both conflict and humor. The journey to Hamunaptra represents the film's first major act of exploration. During this section, audiences are introduced to competing treasure hunters, including the American expedition led by Dr. Alan Chamberlain. This parallel expedition serves several narrative purposes. It creates tension through competition, expands the cast, and ultimately provides the reckless actions that awaken Imhotep. Rather than having the protagonists accidentally unleash evil alone, the screenplay distributes responsibility across multiple groups, making the disaster feel more believable. The arrival at Hamunaptra marks a significant turning point in the narrative. Until this point, the film functions primarily as an adventure centered on exploration and treasure hunting. Once the ancient city is discovered, however, the story gradually transitions into supernatural horror. The pacing slows slightly as characters investigate tombs, translate inscriptions, and uncover mysterious artifacts. This deliberate reduction in speed allows suspense to build before the horror elements fully emerge. The discovery of the Book of the Dead represents one of the story's most important narrative devices. Evelyn's decision to read from the ancient text accidentally resurrects Imhotep, transforming the archaeological expedition into a desperate struggle for survival. Importantly, this mistake aligns perfectly with Evelyn's established curiosity and passion for ancient knowledge. Her actions never feel forced or irrational because they arise naturally from her character. Once Imhotep awakens, the narrative changes dramatically. The adventure structure gives way to escalating horror as the resurrected priest begins restoring his body by consuming the organs of the Americans who opened his tomb. Each victim allows Imhotep to become stronger, creating a countdown that steadily increases the danger. This progression gives the villain a clear objective while maintaining suspense. Audiences understand that every successful attack makes the final confrontation increasingly difficult. The screenplay effectively alternates between moments of intense action and quieter scenes of character development. Rick and Evelyn gradually fall in love while facing overwhelming danger together. Jonathan continues providing comic relief without undermining the seriousness of the supernatural threat. Ardith Bey, leader of the Medjay, initially appears as an antagonist before becoming an essential ally. These evolving relationships ensure the emotional stakes continue growing alongside the physical danger. One particularly effective aspect of the narrative involves information management. The audience rarely knows significantly more than the main characters. Although The Mummy is often remembered for its thrilling action, spectacular visual effects, and entertaining sense of adventure, beneath its exciting surface lies a surprisingly rich collection of themes and symbolic ideas. The film explores timeless subjects such as love, obsession, immortality, greed, destiny, courage, sacrifice, knowledge, and the consequences of disturbing the past. These deeper ideas give emotional weight to the adventure and help explain why the film continues to resonate with audiences decades after its release. Rather than presenting a simple battle between good and evil, The Mummy uses its characters and mythology to examine how human desires can either inspire greatness or lead to destruction. Perhaps the film's most significant theme is the difference between genuine love and destructive obsession. At the center of the story lies the relationship between Imhotep and Anck-Sunamun. On the surface, their romance appears tragic. They fall deeply in love despite knowing their relationship is forbidden. Their willingness to risk everything for one another initially resembles the classic structure of a romantic epic. However, as the story progresses, it becomes clear that Imhotep's love gradually transforms into obsession. His refusal to accept death drives him to violate sacred laws, unleash supernatural forces, and sacrifice countless innocent lives in pursuit of restoring Anck-Sunamun. His emotions, once rooted in affection, become consumed by possession and control. This obsessive love is contrasted beautifully with the developing relationship between Rick O'Connell and Evelyn Carnahan. Their romance grows naturally through mutual respect, shared danger, and emotional trust. Rick never attempts to control Evelyn or define her choices. Instead, he admires her intelligence, courage, and determination. Likewise, Evelyn values Rick not simply for his bravery but for his compassion and willingness to protect others. Their relationship represents healthy love built upon partnership rather than obsession, providing a powerful contrast to Imhotep's tragic descent. Closely connected to this theme is the idea that death should be accepted rather than conquered. Throughout history, countless civilizations have searched for immortality, and ancient Egyptian mythology often focused on preparation for the afterlife. The Mummy transforms this historical fascination into one of its central conflicts. Imhotep refuses to accept the natural order of life and death. His attempt to reverse mortality creates unimaginable suffering for generations to come. The film suggests that trying to escape death at any cost ultimately destroys both the individual and everyone around them. The resurrection rituals symbolize humanity's endless desire to overcome mortality. While modern audiences may view the supernatural elements as fantasy, the emotional idea remains universal. Every culture has stories about eternal life, forbidden knowledge, or magical methods of defeating death. The Mummy reminds viewers that immortality without wisdom or compassion can become a curse rather than a blessing. Imhotep survives physically, yet loses his humanity in the process, becoming a monster both literally and emotionally. Knowledge serves as another major theme throughout the film. Evelyn represents intellectual curiosity at its best. Her passion for history, archaeology, and ancient languages allows forgotten civilizations to be understood rather than feared. She values learning for its own sake and believes knowledge should be preserved. However, the film also demonstrates that knowledge without caution can become dangerous. Her decision to read from the Book of the Dead unintentionally awakens Imhotep. This does not suggest that learning itself is harmful, but rather that wisdom requires understanding the responsibilities that accompany discovery. The contrast between the Book of the Dead and the Book of Amun-Ra further reinforces this idea. Both books contain extraordinary knowledge, yet one brings destruction while the other restores balance. The books symbolize how information itself is neither inherently good nor evil. Instead, its impact depends entirely upon how it is used. Throughout the story, characters repeatedly face choices about whether knowledge should be pursued, protected, or restrained. Curiosity also plays an important symbolic role. Nearly every major event occurs because someone chooses to investigate what should perhaps remain untouched. Archaeologists open ancient tombs, treasure hunters seek hidden riches, and scholars read forgotten texts. The movie celebrates human curiosity because it drives exploration and discovery, but it also warns against arrogance. The characters who approach history with respect generally survive, while those motivated by greed or overconfidence often meet tragic ends. Greed emerges as one of the film's clearest moral themes. Nearly every secondary antagonist is motivated primarily by wealth rather than knowledge or responsibility. Benny Gabba serves as the perfect embodiment of greed throughout the narrative. He repeatedly betrays friends, changes sides whenever danger appears, and values treasure above loyalty or morality. His eventual death inside the treasure chamber provides poetic justice. Surrounded by unimaginable riches, he discovers that wealth has become completely meaningless because it cannot save his life. The treasure itself functions as a powerful symbol. Gold, jewels, and priceless artifacts attract explorers from around the world, yet they conceal unimaginable dangers beneath their glittering surfaces. The hidden riches of Hamunaptra represent temptation. They promise fortune while masking devastating consequences. In this sense, the buried city becomes a metaphor for human desire, reminding audiences that not every reward is worth pursuing. Courage is another central theme explored through multiple characters. Rick demonstrates physical bravery by confronting danger directly, but the film also highlights emotional and intellectual courage. Evelyn repeatedly overcomes fear despite lacking Rick's combat experience. She faces terrifying supernatural events because she understands what must be done to save innocent lives. Jonathan, although often cowardly, occasionally discovers unexpected bravery when protecting his sister. Even Ardith Bey displays remarkable courage through his lifelong commitment to guarding humanity from ancient evil. One of the defining reasons The Mummy has remained such a beloved adventure film is its remarkable visual presentation. From the very first frame, the movie creates a world that feels both grand and mysterious, blending historical inspiration with fantasy in a way that captures the imagination. Director Stephen Sommers and cinematographer Adrian Biddle crafted a visual language that constantly reinforces the film's adventurous spirit while balancing moments of horror, romance, humor, and action. Rather than relying solely on computer-generated imagery, the film combines practical sets, detailed production design, carefully composed cinematography, and innovative visual effects to create a cinematic experience that continues to impress decades after its release. The overall visual style embraces the tradition of classic adventure cinema. Every location is designed to evoke wonder and curiosity, encouraging audiences to feel as though they are embarking on the expedition alongside the characters. Vast deserts stretch endlessly toward the horizon, towering temples disappear beneath centuries of sand, and forgotten tombs hide secrets untouched for thousands of years. These environments are not simply backgrounds for the action. They become active participants in the storytelling, constantly reminding viewers that the heroes are exploring places where history, mythology, and supernatural forces coexist. One of the film's greatest visual achievements is its portrayal of Egypt. Although much of the movie was filmed outside the country, the production creates a convincing cinematic version of ancient Egypt that feels both authentic and mythical. Golden deserts dominate the landscape during daytime scenes, emphasizing the harshness of the environment while highlighting the isolation of the characters. The endless sand becomes a visual symbol of time itself, suggesting that entire civilizations have disappeared beneath its surface while their secrets patiently wait to be uncovered. Color plays an essential role throughout the film. During scenes set in Cairo, warm earth tones dominate the frame. Browns, yellows, oranges, and faded reds create an atmosphere filled with heat, dust, and history. These colors immediately transport viewers into the world of archaeological exploration. As the expedition reaches Hamunaptra, the palette becomes even richer, combining golden sunlight with deep shadows to emphasize both beauty and hidden danger. The city appears majestic during daylight but increasingly threatening as darkness falls. Lighting is carefully used to distinguish different emotional states throughout the narrative. Outdoor sequences rely heavily on bright natural light that showcases the enormous scale of the desert landscapes. These scenes often communicate freedom, exploration, and possibility. In contrast, interior tombs are illuminated with torches, lanterns, and narrow beams of sunlight filtering through ancient stone architecture. This low-key lighting creates suspense by limiting what both the characters and audience can see. Every dark corridor suggests hidden dangers lurking just beyond view. The underground chambers demonstrate particularly effective use of shadow. Ancient columns cast long silhouettes across stone floors, while flickering torchlight creates constantly shifting patterns that make even ordinary statues appear alive. This unstable lighting enhances the supernatural atmosphere long before Imhotep fully returns. Viewers are encouraged to anticipate danger even during relatively quiet moments, making the environment itself feel threatening. Camera movement contributes significantly to the film's adventurous energy. During action sequences, the camera moves dynamically alongside the characters, placing audiences directly into sword fights, horse chases, collapsing temples, and supernatural attacks. Rather than relying on excessive shaky camera techniques, the cinematography maintains clarity even during chaotic moments. Viewers can always understand where characters are located within the environment, allowing action scenes to remain exciting without becoming visually confusing. Wide establishing shots are used frequently to emphasize scale. The enormous deserts surrounding Hamunaptra make the heroes appear small and vulnerable against nature's vastness. Similarly, sweeping views of ancient temples reveal the incredible size of civilizations that once flourished before disappearing beneath the sand. These compositions remind audiences that human beings occupy only a tiny place within the immense passage of history. Close-up shots serve an entirely different purpose. Stephen Sommers frequently uses close framing during moments of suspense to capture subtle emotional reactions. Rick's determination, Evelyn's curiosity, Jonathan's panic, and Imhotep's growing menace are all reinforced through carefully composed facial close-ups. These intimate shots help maintain emotional connection even while the story expands into increasingly spectacular supernatural events. Framing also reinforces relationships between characters. Rick and Evelyn are often positioned together within the same frame as their relationship develops, visually emphasizing their growing partnership. Early in the story, they frequently occupy opposite sides of the composition, reflecting their unfamiliarity and differing personalities. As trust develops, the cinematography increasingly presents them as a unified team confronting danger together. The visual design of Imhotep deserves special attention because it represents one of the film's greatest artistic accomplishments. His gradual regeneration creates a constantly evolving visual character arc. Initially, he appears as a horrifying skeletal creature with rotting flesh, exposed muscles, and missing organs. Each victim he consumes restores another portion of his body until he eventually resembles a living human once again. This progression not only demonstrates advancing visual effects technology but also serves the narrative by making the villain visibly more powerful as the story unfolds. While The Mummy is often celebrated for its action, visual effects, and memorable performances, one of its greatest strengths lies in its exceptional use of music and sound. Every adventure, every frightening encounter, every emotional moment, and every thrilling action sequence is elevated through a carefully crafted audio landscape. Composer Goldsmith created one of the most recognizable adventure scores of the modern era, while the film's sound designers constructed an immersive world filled with ancient mysteries, supernatural horrors, bustling cities, and dangerous deserts. Together, the soundtrack and sound design transform The Mummy from an entertaining action film into a truly cinematic experience that fully engages the audience's emotions. Goldsmith was already regarded as one of Hollywood's greatest composers long before The Mummy entered production. Throughout his remarkable career, he composed music for classics such as Planet of the Apes, Patton, Chinatown, Alien, Poltergeist, First Blood, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, Star Trek, the motion picture, and countless other films. His ability to adapt his musical style to virtually any genre made him the ideal choice for a movie that combined adventure, horror, romance, fantasy, and comedy within a single narrative. Rather than simply creating a traditional action score, Goldsmith approached The Mummy as a sweeping adventure epic. His music constantly shifts between excitement, mystery, danger, romance, and tragedy without ever feeling disconnected. Each major scene receives its own emotional identity while remaining part of a unified musical journey. The score rarely dominates the film unnecessarily. Instead, it supports the storytelling by reinforcing the emotional weight of every important moment. One of the defining characteristics of the soundtrack is its sense of adventure. From the opening scenes, powerful orchestral themes immediately establish the grand scale of the story. Bold brass instruments announce heroic moments, while soaring strings communicate wonder and exploration. These musical choices invite audiences to join Rick, Evelyn, and Jonathan on their expedition long before they reach Hamunaptra. The music creates excitement not only for what is happening on screen but also for what still lies ahead. The main adventure theme serves as the musical identity of the entire film. It accompanies moments of exploration, courage, and discovery, becoming closely associated with Rick O'Connell and the group's journey. The melody is energetic without becoming overwhelming, memorable without becoming repetitive. Whenever audiences hear variations of this theme, they instinctively recognize that the heroes are moving forward despite overwhelming danger. Goldsmith also composed distinct musical ideas for individual characters. Rick's scenes often feature confident, energetic orchestration reflecting his bravery and adventurous spirit. Evelyn's music introduces softer, more elegant melodies that emphasize both her intelligence and growing emotional strength. As their relationship develops, these separate musical ideas begin blending together, subtly reflecting the deepening connection between the two characters. Imhotep receives an entirely different musical identity. Rather than relying solely on loud, aggressive themes, Goldsmith often uses slow, haunting orchestral passages filled with dark harmonies and unsettling textures. Low brass, deep percussion, and mysterious choral elements create an atmosphere of ancient power and supernatural menace. His music rarely rushes. Instead, it moves with deliberate confidence, reflecting the patience of a being who has waited thousands of years for his return. The opening sequence set in ancient Egypt immediately demonstrates the composer's remarkable range. The music begins with solemn grandeur, capturing the majesty of one of history's greatest civilizations. As the forbidden romance between Imhotep and Anck-Sunamun unfolds, the score becomes more intimate and emotional before erupting into tragedy during the pharaoh's murder and Imhotep's punishment. Within only a few minutes, audiences experience awe, romance, suspense, and horror through music alone. The romantic material written for Rick and Evelyn deserves particular recognition. Their relationship develops gradually throughout the story, and Goldsmith avoids overly sentimental melodies. Instead, gentle orchestral passages quietly underscore their growing trust and affection. These themes never distract from the adventure but instead remind audiences that genuine human connection remains one of the story's emotional foundations. By the film's conclusion, their shared musical identity feels completely earned. Action scenes showcase some of the score's most exciting compositions. Whether accompanying horseback chases, sword fights, collapsing temples, or supernatural attacks, Goldsmith's music constantly adapts to the rhythm of the action. Fast-moving strings generate urgency, while powerful percussion increases intensity without overwhelming dialogue or sound effects. The orchestration maintains clarity even during the film's largest action sequences, ensuring that audiences remain emotionally connected rather than simply overwhelmed by noise. The famous camel chase through the desert provides an excellent example of musical pacing. Rather than emphasizing fear, the score captures excitement, movement, and momentum. Even moments of danger retain an adventurous spirit, reminding audiences that the film embraces classic swashbuckling entertainment rather than relentless darkness. One of the soundtrack's greatest achievements is its seamless blending of Eastern-inspired musical colors with traditional Hollywood orchestration. Goldsmith incorporated certain scales, percussion instruments, and tonal textures that evoke the atmosphere of ancient Egypt without attempting strict historical authenticity. The result feels exotic enough to transport audiences into another world while remaining fully accessible to modern listeners. When The Mummy was released in the summer of 1999, expectations were relatively modest compared to many major blockbuster releases of the era. Universal Pictures hoped the film would successfully revive one of its most recognizable classic monster properties, but few anticipated that it would become one of the year's biggest commercial successes and one of the defining adventure films of its generation. Although critics were initially divided in their opinions, audiences embraced the film enthusiastically, leading to impressive box office results, a highly successful franchise, and a reputation that has continued to grow stronger over the years. The film premiered during an especially competitive period for Hollywood. The late 1990s saw the release of numerous large-scale blockbusters featuring groundbreaking visual effects, including films that pushed the boundaries of action and fantasy filmmaking. To stand out in such a crowded marketplace, The Mummy needed to offer something different. Rather than focusing exclusively on horror, it presented itself as a thrilling blend of action, comedy, romance, mystery, and supernatural adventure. This combination immediately appealed to a broad audience that included families, action fans, horror enthusiasts, and viewers looking for classic adventure entertainment. From its opening weekend, the film performed exceptionally well at the box office. Strong ticket sales demonstrated that audiences responded positively to its energetic pace, memorable characters, and entertaining balance of excitement and humor. Word of mouth quickly became one of the film's greatest strengths. Many viewers recommended it to friends and family, praising its ability to deliver non-stop entertainment without taking itself too seriously. This positive audience response allowed the movie to maintain strong attendance well beyond its opening weeks. Internationally, The Mummy achieved remarkable success. The adventure themes translated easily across different cultures, and audiences around the world connected with its universal story of courage, friendship, ancient mysteries, and supernatural danger. Its impressive worldwide earnings firmly established the film as one of Universal Pictures' most profitable releases of the year and confirmed that the studio had successfully reinvented one of its classic cinematic properties for a modern audience. Professional critics, however, offered a wider range of opinions. Many reviewers praised the film's entertainment value while questioning aspects of its story and historical accuracy. Some critics argued that the movie relied heavily on spectacle rather than narrative depth. Others believed that the rapid pacing occasionally sacrificed character development in favor of constant action. Despite these criticisms, even many mixed reviews acknowledged the film's undeniable energy and its ability to keep audiences thoroughly entertained from beginning to end. One of the most frequently praised elements was Brendan Fraser's performance as Rick O'Connell. Critics consistently highlighted his natural charisma, comedic timing, and willingness to embrace the role without excessive seriousness. Rather than portraying Rick as an invincible action hero, Fraser created a character who felt approachable, humorous, and genuinely heroic. His performance reminded many reviewers of classic adventure stars from earlier decades, combining physical courage with warmth and self-awareness. Rachel Weisz also received widespread praise for her portrayal of Evelyn Carnahan. Reviewers appreciated that the character was intelligent, resourceful, and emotionally engaging instead of simply serving as a traditional damsel in distress. Her chemistry with Fraser became one of the film's most celebrated qualities. Many critics observed that their believable relationship helped elevate the movie beyond a typical effects-driven blockbuster, providing audiences with emotional investment alongside the spectacular action. Arnold Vosloo's portrayal of Imhotep earned considerable recognition as well. While some reviewers felt the screenplay could have explored the villain's motivations more deeply, most agreed that Vosloo brought dignity, menace, and tragic complexity to the role. His calm, commanding presence distinguished Imhotep from more conventional action villains, making him both frightening and strangely sympathetic. The gradual regeneration of the character also impressed critics who admired the seamless combination of performance, makeup, and visual effects. The supporting cast received similarly positive attention. John Hannah's comic performance as Jonathan Carnahan was frequently cited as one of the film's most enjoyable elements. Kevin J. O'Connor's portrayal of the cowardly Benny provided memorable comic relief while maintaining enough unpredictability to remain an effective secondary antagonist. Oded Fayer's performance as Ardith Bey also impressed reviewers, with many noting the authority and mystery he brought to the role despite relatively limited screen time. The film's visual effects generated extensive discussion among critics. At the time of release, many reviewers considered the computer-generated imagery highly impressive, particularly Imhotep's gradual resurrection, the massive sandstorm shaped like a human face, and the terrifying scarab beetles. These sequences demonstrated how rapidly digital technology had advanced during the late 1990s. Although some effects inevitably appear dated by modern standards, many continue to hold up surprisingly well because they were carefully integrated with practical sets, physical makeup, and real stunt work. The production design also earned significant praise. Critics admired the elaborate recreation of ancient temples, underground chambers, archaeological sites, and the legendary city of Hamunaptra. Rather than presenting a historically precise version of ancient Egypt, the film embraced a heightened fantasy aesthetic that captured audiences' imaginations. The detailed sets, costumes, and props created a rich visual world that contributed greatly to the film's immersive atmosphere. Few adventure films of the modern era have enjoyed the lasting influence of The Mummy. While many blockbuster movies achieve impressive financial success before gradually fading from public memory, The Mummy has experienced the opposite. Since its release in 1999, its popularity has continued to grow through home media, television broadcasts, streaming services, internet communities, and younger generations discovering it for the first time. More than 25 years after its premiere, The film remains one of the most frequently recommended action-adventure movies ever made and continues to influence filmmakers, writers, game developers, and audiences around the world. Perhaps the clearest sign of the film's legacy is that it successfully transformed a forgotten Universal monster into one of the studio's most valuable modern franchises. Before 1999, The Mummy was remembered primarily as one of Universal's classic horror films from the 1930s and its later sequels featuring different actors and storylines. Stephen Sommers' version completely reinvented the property by shifting its focus toward large-scale adventure while preserving enough supernatural mythology to maintain its connection to the original concept. This creative decision not only revitalized the franchise but also demonstrated that classic cinematic icons could successfully evolve for contemporary audiences. The film's commercial success immediately led to the creation of The Mummy Returns in 2001. Reuniting Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, Arnold Vosloo, and much of the original creative team, the sequel expanded the mythology while introducing new characters, larger action sequences, and even more ambitious visual effects. Although opinions on the sequel varied, it became another major box office success, confirming that audiences remained deeply invested in the world established by the first film. The popularity of the second movie eventually led to The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in 2008. While this installment shifted the story from Egypt to China and featured several cast changes, including Maria Bello replacing Rachel Weisz as Evelyn, it demonstrated the strength of the franchise's brand recognition. Although many fans preferred the original cast and setting, the existence of a third film reflected the enormous popularity created by the 1999 movie. The franchise expanded even further through spin-offs. The most notable example was The Scorpion King, released in 2002. Introduced briefly during The Mummy Returns, the character became the focus of his own film starring Dwayne Johnson in his first leading movie role. The success of The Scorpion King launched an entirely separate franchise that eventually included multiple sequels. In this way, The Mummy not only established its own series but also created opportunities for additional stories within the same fictional universe. The influence of The Mummy extends far beyond direct sequels. It helped redefine what audiences expected from adventure films. Instead of treating action, horror, comedy, and romance as separate genres, the movie demonstrated that these elements could successfully coexist within a single narrative. Countless adventure films released during the following decades adopted similar approaches, blending supernatural mythology with humor and character-driven storytelling rather than relying solely on spectacle or seriousness. Many filmmakers have acknowledged the importance of balancing tone in blockbuster cinema, and The Mummy remains one of the finest examples of this philosophy. Its ability to transition naturally between frightening horror sequences, exciting action, heartfelt romance, and light-hearted comedy has become a benchmark frequently discussed when evaluating later adventure films. Directors seeking to create family-friendly action movies often cite the importance of maintaining emotional variety, something The Mummy achieved with remarkable consistency. The movie also influenced the portrayal of adventure heroes. Before Rick O'Connell, many action protagonists were characterized primarily by toughness and emotional distance. Brendan Fraser introduced a different type of hero, one who combined courage with kindness, humor, vulnerability, and genuine affection for the people around him. Rick was capable of defeating enemies, but he also laughed, made mistakes, expressed fear, and cared deeply about protecting others. This more approachable style influenced numerous later protagonists across film, television, and video games. One of the reasons The Mummy has remained one of the most beloved adventure films ever made is the emotional connection it continues to create with audiences across multiple generations. While many blockbuster movies entertain viewers for a short period before being replaced by newer releases, The Mummy has developed a loyal following that has only grown stronger over time. People who first watched it in theaters during 1999 often describe it as one of the defining films of their childhood or teenage years, while younger audiences who discovered it through television, streaming platforms, or home video frequently react with the same enthusiasm. The film's enduring popularity demonstrates that its appeal extends far beyond visual effects or action sequences. It resonates because it captures a timeless sense of adventure that feels increasingly rare in modern cinema. For audiences who experienced the film during its original theatrical release, The Mummy represented a perfect balance between old-fashioned storytelling and cutting-edge filmmaking. The late 1990s marked a period when digital visual effects were becoming increasingly sophisticated, allowing filmmakers to create scenes that had previously been impossible. At the same time, many movies still relied heavily on practical sets, real locations, physical stunts, and character-driven storytelling. Viewers often remember The Mummy as one of the last great adventure films that successfully combined both approaches, creating spectacular action without sacrificing personality or emotional warmth. Many audience members have described their first viewing as an experience filled with constant excitement. The movie rarely slows down for long, yet it never feels exhausting. Instead, it alternates between suspense, humor, romance, mystery, and action in a rhythm that keeps viewers emotionally engaged. Rather than remembering only individual scenes, audiences frequently recall the entire experience as one continuous adventure. This seamless pacing contributes significantly to the film's lasting reputation and explains why many fans continue revisiting it years later. Rick O'Connell quickly became one of the most admired adventure heroes of modern cinema. Audiences connected with him because he differed from many action protagonists of the era. Instead of presenting himself as unstoppable or emotionally distant, Rick displayed courage alongside vulnerability, humor, kindness, and genuine compassion. Viewers appreciated that he frequently found himself overwhelmed by impossible situations yet continued moving forward because protecting others mattered more than his own safety. His willingness to laugh, improvise, and admit fear made him feel relatable rather than untouchable. Many fans have commented that Rick represents the type of hero they genuinely wanted to become rather than simply admire from a distance. He does not possess supernatural abilities or extraordinary technology. His greatest strengths are loyalty, determination, and the ability to remain hopeful under impossible circumstances. These qualities resonate across generations because they represent values audiences continue to respect regardless of changing trends in action cinema. Evelyn Carnahan also inspired exceptionally positive audience reactions. Viewers admired her intelligence, curiosity, and personal growth throughout the story. Many women appreciated seeing a female protagonist whose greatest strengths initially came from education and knowledge rather than physical combat. At the same time, Evelyn gradually discovers tremendous courage without abandoning the qualities that originally defined her personality. She never transforms into a completely different person. Instead, she becomes a more confident version of herself, demonstrating that bravery often grows from experience rather than natural fearlessness. Modern audiences frequently celebrate Evelyn as one of the finest female characters in adventure cinema. Online discussions often highlight how naturally her intelligence influences the story. Rather than existing merely to explain historical information, her expertise consistently drives the narrative forward. Without Evelyn's understanding of ancient languages and Egyptian mythology, the heroes would never have been capable of confronting Imhotep successfully. Viewers continue praising this balanced approach because it allows her contributions to feel authentic instead of forced. The romantic relationship between Rick and Evelyn receives particularly enthusiastic responses from audiences. Many fans consider it one of the greatest romances ever presented in an adventure film because it develops gradually through shared experiences instead of relying on immediate attraction. Their mutual respect grows naturally as they repeatedly save one another's lives and recognize each other's strengths. Audiences often describe their relationship as refreshing because neither character overshadows the other. Instead, they function as equal partners whose different abilities complement one another perfectly. Humor represents another element that audiences consistently praise. Jonathan Carnahan's comic timing, Rick's sarcastic observations, and the playful interactions between the main characters create moments of genuine laughter without diminishing the seriousness of the supernatural threat. Viewers frequently comment that the humor feels organic because it emerges from personality rather than forced jokes. Even during dangerous situations, characters respond in believable ways that make them feel human. This balance prevents the film from becoming either overwhelmingly dark or excessively comedic. One of the greatest reasons The Mummy has endured as a beloved adventure film is the strength of its characters. While the movie is filled with spectacular action sequences, supernatural creatures, and breathtaking visual effects, None of those elements would have had the same impact without believable people at the center of the story. Every major character undergoes meaningful development throughout the narrative, facing internal struggles as well as external dangers. Their personal growth gives emotional depth to the adventure and transforms what could have been a simple treasure-hunting story into a journey about courage, responsibility, trust, love, and redemption. Each character enters the story with different motivations and flaws, but their experiences inside Hamunaptra ultimately change who they become. Rick O'Connell experiences the film's most obvious heroic transformation. When audiences first meet him, he is a former French Foreign Legion officer awaiting execution in Cairo. Although physically capable and confident, Rick initially appears to be a man primarily concerned with survival. His military past has left him skeptical, practical, and somewhat emotionally guarded. He accepts Evelyn's offer to guide her expedition largely because it offers freedom rather than because he believes in the historical significance of the mission. At this stage, Rick functions as a skilled survivor rather than an idealistic hero. As the adventure unfolds, Rick gradually reveals qualities hidden beneath his rugged exterior. He repeatedly places himself in danger to protect others, often making decisions that provide no personal benefit. His bravery becomes increasingly selfless. Instead of fighting merely to stay alive, he begins risking everything for Evelyn, Jonathan, and eventually the entire world. This evolution demonstrates that true heroism is measured not by physical strength but by the willingness to sacrifice personal safety for the sake of others. Rick's relationship with Evelyn plays a crucial role in his development. Initially, he views her as an inexperienced academic whose curiosity may lead everyone into trouble. However, as he witnesses her intelligence, determination, and courage, his respect steadily grows. He learns that strength exists in many forms and that knowledge can be just as valuable as combat skills. By the film's conclusion, Rick no longer sees himself as Evelyn's protector alone but as her equal partner. Their relationship transforms him from a solitary survivor into someone willing to build a future with another person. Evelyn Carnahan undergoes perhaps the most dramatic personal evolution in the entire story. At the beginning of the film, she is introduced as a brilliant librarian and Egyptologist whose greatest strengths lie in her education and passion for history. Although exceptionally intelligent, she lacks confidence outside the academic environment. Her clumsiness, nervous energy, and inexperience in dangerous situations often create humorous moments that make her immediately relatable. She dreams of discovering forgotten civilizations but has never truly faced the realities of exploration. The expedition to Hamunaptra forces Evelyn to confront fears she never imagined. She quickly discovers that historical knowledge alone cannot prepare someone for supernatural horrors, collapsing temples, or life-threatening battles. Rather than retreating when confronted with danger, however, she gradually becomes more courageous with each challenge. Importantly, her transformation never requires abandoning her intellectual identity. Instead, she combines growing confidence with the expertise that already defines her personality. Evelyn's greatest strength throughout the film remains her curiosity and determination to understand the past. Even after accidentally awakening Imhotep by reading from the Book of the Dead, she refuses to surrender to guilt or fear. Instead, she accepts responsibility for her mistake and dedicates herself to correcting it. This willingness to confront the consequences of her own actions demonstrates remarkable emotional maturity. By the conclusion, Evelyn has evolved from an enthusiastic scholar into a genuine adventurer capable of matching Rick's courage while retaining her unique intellectual gifts. Their romantic relationship develops alongside these personal transformations. Neither Rick nor Evelyn changes solely because of romance. Instead, each inspires the other to become a better version of themselves. Rick learns emotional openness, while Evelyn gains practical confidence. Their partnership illustrates one of the film's central messages. The strongest relationships encourage mutual growth rather than dependence. Imhotep represents a very different type of character arc. Unlike the heroes, his journey is tragic rather than redemptive. At the beginning of the story, he appears motivated by genuine love for Anck-Sunamun. His willingness to risk everything in an attempt to resurrect her initially evokes sympathy despite the forbidden nature of their relationship. However, centuries of suffering beneath the Hamdai transform that love into obsession. Upon returning to life, Imhotep demonstrates extraordinary intelligence, patience, and determination, yet every action becomes increasingly driven by selfish desire rather than genuine affection. His gradual physical regeneration mirrors his moral deterioration. As his body becomes more complete, his humanity diminishes. Each life he consumes strengthens him physically while distancing him emotionally from the compassionate priest he may once have been. Instead of accepting the natural cycle of life and death, Imhotep chooses domination over acceptance. His refusal to release the past ultimately destroys him. This tragic arc serves as a warning about how obsession can corrupt even the deepest forms of love. Jonathan Carnahan provides one of the film's most entertaining examples of subtle character development. Initially introduced as a charming opportunist primarily interested in wealth and excitement, Jonathan often appears irresponsible and unreliable. He constantly searches for quick profits, exaggerates his confidence, and avoids danger whenever possible. At first glance, he seems destined to remain comic relief throughout the adventure. One of the most impressive achievements of The Mummy is the incredible attention given to its costume and set design. These two elements do far more than simply make the film visually attractive. They establish the time period, define the personalities of the characters, reinforce the themes of the story, and create a believable world where history and fantasy coexist. Every costume, every temple, every artifact, and every piece of architecture helps immerse the audience in the adventure. Together, the work of the costume designers, production designers, set decorators, prop makers, and makeup artists transforms a fictional interpretation of ancient Egypt into one of the most memorable cinematic worlds ever created. The film takes place primarily during the 1920s, a period often referred to as the Golden Age of archaeology. Public fascination with ancient Egypt was growing rapidly, fueled by archaeological discoveries and increasing international interest in Egyptian civilization. The production team embraced this historical backdrop while allowing themselves the creative freedom to produce a heightened adventure world rather than an exact historical recreation. The result is a visual style that feels authentic enough to be convincing while remaining exciting enough to support the film's fantasy elements. Rick O'Connell's costume immediately establishes his personality before he even speaks. His outfit consists of practical military-inspired clothing designed for survival rather than appearance. Loose shirts, durable trousers, leather belts, boots, holsters, and weathered fabrics communicate that Rick is an experienced soldier and adventurer who values function above fashion. Unlike wealthy explorers who travel with expensive equipment and elegant wardrobes, Rick dresses as someone who has spent years surviving harsh environments. The simplicity of Rick's costume also reinforces his humble background. Nothing about his clothing suggests wealth or social status. Instead, every piece appears worn through use, subtly telling the audience that he has earned his experience through difficult circumstances. Throughout the film, his clothes become increasingly damaged, dirty, and torn as the adventure progresses. Rather than replacing costumes with clean versions between scenes, the filmmakers carefully tracked this deterioration to reflect the physical journey realistically. Brendan Fraser's costume became iconic because it perfectly balances practicality with timeless adventure style. The rolled-up sleeves, leather equipment, and rugged appearance have since become closely associated with the modern cinematic adventurer. Many later films featuring treasure hunters or explorers adopted similar costume designs, demonstrating the lasting influence of Rick O'Connell's appearance. Evelyn Carnahan's wardrobe tells a completely different story. At the beginning of the film, her clothing reflects her life as a librarian and scholar. She wears elegant dresses appropriate for a well-educated woman working in Cairo during the 1920s. Her outfits emphasize refinement, intelligence, and professionalism rather than physical capability. Soft fabrics, carefully arranged hairstyles, and tasteful accessories establish her as someone more comfortable inside libraries than ancient tombs. As the expedition continues, Evelyn's costumes gradually evolve alongside her character development. The increasingly dangerous environment forces her to adopt more practical clothing suited for exploration. Dust, torn fabric, and weathered appearances visually communicate her transformation from sheltered academic to capable adventurer. Importantly, the costume changes never erase her femininity or intelligence. Instead, they reflect her growing confidence while preserving the qualities that originally defined her personality. The contrast between Rick and Evelyn's costumes also symbolizes their different life experiences. Rick's clothing reflects action and survival, while Evelyn's initially represents knowledge and civilization. As their relationship develops, these visual differences become less pronounced, subtly reinforcing how they learn from one another throughout the story. Jonathan Carnahan's wardrobe perfectly captures his personality. His clothing appears stylish but somewhat excessive, suggesting someone who enjoys presenting himself as more successful than he truly is. Well-tailored suits, hats, polished shoes, and decorative accessories communicate his desire to appear sophisticated despite his frequent financial difficulties. Even as circumstances become increasingly dangerous, Jonathan often manages to maintain an appearance that reflects his charming yet irresponsible nature. Ardith Bay's costume immediately distinguishes him from every other character in the film. His dark robes, elaborate head coverings, leather equipment, and traditional garments establish him as a member of the Medjay long before audiences fully understand his role. The costume emphasizes discipline, mystery, and ancient tradition. Unlike the archaeologists and treasure hunters whose clothing reflects the modern world of the 1920s, Ardith appears almost timeless, representing an order that has existed for centuries. His practical desert clothing also demonstrates exceptional attention to environmental realism. Every piece appears designed for survival in extreme heat, while allowing complete freedom of movement during horseback riding and combat. The costume's layered construction provides both visual complexity and functional credibility, helping Ardith become one of the film's most memorable supporting characters. Imhotep's costume design presents one of the production's greatest artistic challenges because his appearance changes continuously throughout the story. During the opening scenes set in ancient Egypt, his ceremonial robes establish him as a respected high priest. Rich fabrics, elaborate jewelry, and carefully designed religious garments communicate his high social status and spiritual authority. These costumes immediately distinguish him from ordinary citizens while reinforcing the grandeur of ancient Egyptian civilization. One of the most underrated reasons for The Mummy's lasting popularity is the quality of its screenplay. While audiences often remember the spectacular visual effects, exciting action scenes, and memorable characters, the script itself serves as the foundation that allows every other element to succeed. Written by Stephen Sommers, the screenplay expertly combines adventure, horror, comedy, romance, mystery, and fantasy into a single, cohesive narrative. The dialogue feels natural, the pacing remains consistently engaging, and every conversation either develops a character, advances the story, or increases the emotional stakes. Rather than relying on lengthy exposition or overly complicated mythology, the script trusts its characters to reveal the world through their personalities and interactions. One of the screenplay's greatest strengths is its economy. Every scene has a clear purpose. There is very little wasted dialogue or unnecessary exposition. Instead of stopping the adventure to explain every detail of Egyptian mythology, the script gradually reveals important information through conversations, discoveries, and unfolding events. The audience learns alongside the characters, creating a sense of shared exploration that keeps viewers emotionally invested throughout the film. The opening sequence demonstrates this efficiency immediately. Within only a few minutes, the screenplay introduces ancient Egypt, establishes the forbidden relationship between Imhotep and Ankh-Sunamun, explains the Homdai curse, presents the Medjay, and creates the central conflict that drives the entire story. Despite covering centuries of history, the dialogue remains concise because much of the storytelling is communicated visually. Characters say only what is necessary, allowing the audience to interpret emotions through actions rather than excessive explanation. When the story shifts to 1926, the tone changes noticeably, and the dialogue reflects this transition. The screenplay introduces Evelyn Carnahan through conversations that immediately establish her personality. She speaks with enthusiasm, intelligence, and curiosity, often becoming so excited about archaeology that she momentarily forgets the practical world around her. Her dialogue reveals not only her knowledge but also her genuine passion for history. She never sounds like someone reciting information for the audience's benefit. Instead, she speaks as a scholar naturally discussing subjects she loves. Rick O'Connell's dialogue creates an effective contrast with Evelyn. Where Evelyn often approaches situations academically, Rick responds with practical experience and dry humor. His lines are confident without becoming arrogant, and his sarcasm often serves as a defense mechanism rather than simple comic relief. The screenplay wisely avoids turning him into a stereotypical action hero who constantly delivers exaggerated one-liners. Instead, Rick's humor emerges naturally from his personality and the absurd situations surrounding him. One reason Rick remains such a beloved protagonist is that his dialogue reflects emotional honesty. He rarely pretends to understand ancient mythology or archaeology, openly admitting when something confuses him. This humility makes him more relatable than many action heroes who appear capable of mastering every challenge immediately. His conversations often reveal respect for Evelyn's expertise, reinforcing the partnership that develops between them. The chemistry between Rick and Evelyn owes much to the screenplay's careful dialogue. Their relationship grows through conversation rather than dramatic declarations of love. Early exchanges contain playful disagreement, mild skepticism, and subtle attraction. As they survive increasingly dangerous situations together, their conversations gradually become warmer and more personal. By the end of the film, audiences fully believe in their romance because the screenplay allows it to develop organically over time. Humor plays an essential role throughout the script. Stephen Sommers understood that constant suspense and action could become emotionally exhausting, so he regularly introduces lighter moments that allow audiences to relax before the next major challenge. Importantly, these jokes almost always emerge from character rather than circumstance. Jonathan's exaggerated confidence, Rick's dry observations, Evelyn's occasional awkwardness, and Benny's cowardice all generate comedy that feels authentic to each individual's personality. Jonathan Carnahan perhaps receives the screenplay's funniest dialogue. His tendency to exaggerate his own importance while desperately avoiding danger creates countless memorable exchanges. He often attempts to appear sophisticated or brave despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. These moments never make him feel foolish or irritating because the script balances his comic flaws with genuine loyalty toward his sister. As a result, audiences laugh with Jonathan rather than simply laughing at him. Benny Gabber's dialogue provides another excellent example of character-driven writing. Every conversation reflects his opportunistic nature. He constantly changes loyalties depending on who appears strongest at any given moment. His words frequently contradict his actions, highlighting his selfishness and lack of integrity. Even when speaking politely, audiences recognize that Benny is usually thinking about personal survival or financial gain. The screenplay never requires lengthy explanations because his dialogue consistently reveals his true character. Imhotep's dialogue differs dramatically from every other major character. While the heroes often engage in casual conversation and humor, Imhotep speaks with calm confidence and deliberate authority. His words carry the weight of centuries, reflecting both his intelligence and his overwhelming sense of superiority. Rather than shouting threats or delivering melodramatic speeches, he often speaks quietly, making his presence even more intimidating. This restrained approach allows the villain to appear powerful without becoming theatrical. The screenplay also deserves recognition for how it handles exposition. Adventure films often struggle with explaining fictional mythology without interrupting the narrative. The Mummy solves this problem by distributing information across multiple characters. Evelyn explains historical details, Ardith Bay provides cultural context, and the unfolding events themselves reveal supernatural rules. Because no single character delivers lengthy lectures, audiences absorb information naturally while remaining engaged with the story. Pacing represents another major achievement of the screenplay. Conversations rarely continue longer than necessary before transitioning into action, discovery, or another important development. However, the script also understands when to slow down. Quiet moments between Rick and Evelyn allow emotional relationships to deepen, while discussions with Ardith Bay provide opportunities for mystery and suspense. This careful variation prevents the movie from becoming either relentlessly chaotic or unnecessarily slow. The screenplay structure also demonstrates remarkable balance between multiple genres. Horror scenes contain enough suspense to feel genuinely frightening, yet moments of humor prevent the atmosphere from becoming oppressive. Romantic conversations feel sincere without overwhelming the adventure, while action sequences remain emotionally meaningful because audiences care about the people involved. This tonal balance requires exceptional writing discipline, as emphasizing one genre too heavily could easily have undermined the others. Many individual lines have become memorable because they perfectly capture character personality. Rick frequently responds to extraordinary situations with understated confidence, making even impossible circumstances feel manageable. Evelyn's excitement when discussing ancient history reveals her lifelong passion. Jonathan's constant attempts to appear more capable than he actually is generate both humor and affection. Ardith Bey speaks with quiet wisdom that reinforces his role as guardian of ancient secrets. Another strength of the script is its avoidance of unnecessary complexity. The central story remains straightforward enough for audiences of all ages to follow easily. Heroes accidentally awaken an ancient evil, learn how to defeat it, and undertake a dangerous journey to save the world. Around this simple framework, however, the screenplay layers emotional relationships, historical mythology, supernatural mystery, and personal growth. The result feels rich without becoming confusing. The script also excels at establishing clear motivations. Every major character possesses understandable goals. Rick seeks survival before discovering a greater purpose. Evelyn wants knowledge and historical discovery. Jonathan hopes to find treasure. Ardith Bey wishes to prevent ancient evil from returning. Imhotep desires to resurrect Anxunamun regardless of the cost. Because these motivations remain consistent throughout the film, character decisions always feel logical even under extraordinary circumstances. One subtle aspect of the screenplay involves its treatment of fear. Characters openly acknowledge danger rather than pretending to be fearless. Rick admits when situations appear impossible. Jonathan frequently expresses panic. Evelyn experiences moments of uncertainty despite her determination. These honest reactions make the dialogue feel human and help audiences connect emotionally with the characters. Courage is portrayed not as the absence of fear but as the decision to continue despite being afraid. The screenplay also demonstrates considerable respect for audience intelligence. It rarely explains emotional moments through explicit dialogue. Instead, small gestures, facial expressions, and carefully chosen words allow viewers to interpret relationships themselves. Rick and Evelyn's growing affection, Ardith's increasing trust, and even Imhotep's tragic obsession are communicated through subtle interactions rather than lengthy speeches. The climax showcases the screenplay's strongest qualities. Dialogue becomes increasingly concise as the action intensifies. Every line serves a practical purpose, whether coordinating the hero's efforts, revealing critical information, or heightening emotional stakes. The script understands that during moments of extreme danger, characters should speak only when necessary. This restraint allows the action, music, and performances to communicate much of the drama without excessive verbal explanation. Ultimately, The Mummy remains a model of effective blockbuster screenwriting because it never forgets that memorable dialogue begins with memorable characters. Every conversation feels authentic to the people involved, every joke emerges naturally from personality, every romantic exchange develops genuine relationships, and every piece of exposition advances the story without slowing its momentum. The screenplay combines intelligent structure with entertaining dialogue, creating a film that is endlessly quotable, emotionally engaging, and consistently enjoyable. More than 2 decades after its release, its writing continues to demonstrate that the strongest adventure films are built not only on spectacular action but also on characters whose words are every bit as memorable as their heroic deeds. The marketing campaign for The Mummy played a crucial role in transforming the film from a risky remake of a classic monster movie into one of the biggest blockbuster successes of 1999. Universal Pictures faced a unique challenge when promoting the film. While the original 1932 version starring Boris Karloff was respected as a horror classic, modern audiences were far more familiar with action-adventure spectacles than traditional Gothic monster films. The studio therefore had to convince moviegoers that this new version was not simply another horror remake but a thrilling cinematic event that combined adventure, comedy, romance, fantasy, and supernatural action. The campaign ultimately succeeded by emphasizing excitement, mystery, and spectacle while introducing audiences to memorable characters rather than focusing solely on the monster itself. One of the first major decisions made by Universal's marketing team was defining the movie's identity. Instead of presenting The Mummy as a horror film, advertisements consistently highlighted its adventurous tone. Television commercials and theatrical trailers showcased breathtaking desert landscapes, ancient temples, massive explosions, sword fights, supernatural creatures, and fast-paced action sequences. While scenes featuring Imhotep were certainly included, they were balanced carefully with moments of humor and adventure. This approach broadened the film's appeal, attracting families, teenagers, and action fans in addition to traditional horror audiences. The theatrical trailers became particularly effective because they revealed just enough mystery without explaining the entire story. Viewers saw glimpses of ancient Egypt, mysterious books, terrifying scarab beetles, and the resurrection of Imhotep, but the marketing avoided revealing many of the film's biggest surprises. This balance encouraged curiosity while preserving suspense. Audiences entered theaters knowing they would experience an exciting supernatural adventure, yet many of the film's most memorable moments remained unexpected. The trailers also placed significant emphasis on Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. Rather than allowing visual effects alone to sell the movie, Universal highlighted the chemistry between Rick O'Connell and Evelyn Carnahan. Their humorous exchanges, adventurous partnership, and developing romance communicated that the film offered engaging characters alongside spectacular action. This decision proved especially important because audiences often connect more strongly with people than with visual effects alone. Brendan Fraser's image became central to the promotional campaign. At the time, he had already earned popularity through successful films that showcased both comedy and adventure, making him an ideal choice to represent the movie's energetic tone. Promotional materials frequently featured Fraser carrying weapons, standing before ancient ruins, or confronting supernatural threats with confidence and determination. His approachable personality distinguished him from many action stars of the era, allowing audiences to see Rick O'Connell as an adventurous hero they could genuinely enjoy spending time with. Rachel Weisz also received considerable attention throughout the marketing campaign. Evelyn was promoted not merely as a romantic interest but as an intelligent archaeologist whose knowledge played a central role in the story. This distinguished the film from many action movies of the late 1990s, where female characters often received far less emphasis during promotional campaigns. By highlighting Evelyn's importance, Universal broadened the movie's appeal while accurately representing one of its strongest characters. The film's official posters became some of the most recognizable movie advertisements of the decade. Most prominently featured the enormous face of Imhotep emerging from a massive desert sandstorm above the heroes. This unforgettable image immediately communicated both the supernatural threat and the epic scale of the adventure. The composition cleverly balanced mystery with excitement, revealing the villain without fully explaining his powers. The poster's warm desert colors, dramatic lighting, and striking typography reinforced the adventurous atmosphere while distinguishing the movie from darker horror films. Another effective aspect of the poster design was its use of scale. Tiny human figures standing beneath enormous pyramids, temples, and supernatural phenomena visually emphasized the overwhelming forces the heroes would face. Audiences immediately understood that this was not a small, intimate horror story but a grand cinematic adventure involving ancient civilizations and powerful mythical beings. Television advertising played an enormous role in building anticipation. Short commercials highlighted exciting action sequences, spectacular visual effects, and memorable dialogue while repeatedly emphasizing the film's release date. Because the movie appealed to multiple age groups, advertisements appeared during family programming, sporting events, and popular entertainment broadcasts. This broad exposure helped generate awareness among audiences who might not normally seek out horror-themed entertainment. Print advertising remained highly influential during the late 1990s. Movie magazines, entertainment publications, newspapers, and promotional features regularly showcased interviews with the cast and director. Articles often focused on the ambitious visual effects, challenging desert filming conditions, elaborate sets, and impressive makeup work required to bring Imhotep to life. These behind-the-scenes stories generated excitement by demonstrating the enormous scale of the production. Entertainment television programs also featured interviews with Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, Stephen Sommers, and other members of the cast. Their enthusiasm for the project contributed significantly to public interest. Fraser's natural charm and humorous personality made him an especially effective ambassador for the film. His interviews reinforced the impression that The Mummy would be an enjoyable, entertaining adventure rather than an excessively serious supernatural thriller. One of the campaign's greatest strengths involved showcasing the film's groundbreaking visual effects. During the late 1990s, audiences were increasingly fascinated by advances in computer-generated imagery. Promotional materials highlighted sequences involving Imhotep's regeneration, the giant sandstorm shaped like a human face, swarms of scarab beetles, and collapsing ancient temples. These spectacular moments demonstrated that The Mummy offered state-of-the-art cinematic technology while still maintaining the excitement of classic adventure storytelling. However, Universal wisely avoided relying exclusively on digital spectacle. Many promotional interviews emphasized that the production combined practical effects, real locations, elaborate physical sets, makeup artistry, and traditional stunt work alongside computer-generated imagery. This combination reassured audiences that the movie possessed substance beyond visual technology alone. Merchandising expanded the promotional campaign beyond movie theaters. Action figures based on Rick O'Connell, Imhotep, Evelyn, and other characters became available alongside collectible statues, model kits, clothing, posters, trading cards, books, and various licensed products. These items allowed fans to continue engaging with the film after leaving the cinema while simultaneously increasing public awareness among potential viewers. Novelizations and companion books also contributed to the marketing effort. Behind-the-scenes publications explored concept art, production design, costume creation, visual effects development, and historical inspirations. These materials appealed particularly to movie enthusiasts interested in learning how such an ambitious production had been created. Video game adaptations represented another important promotional strategy. Games inspired by the film introduced players to its characters, mythology, and environments while extending the franchise beyond traditional cinema. Although technology limited some gameplay experiences compared to modern standards, these adaptations helped strengthen brand recognition and introduced younger audiences to the world of The Mummy. The movie's release timing proved particularly effective. Launching during the summer blockbuster season positioned The Mummy alongside the year's biggest entertainment events. Summer audiences traditionally sought exciting large-scale adventures, making the film's combination of action, fantasy, and humor especially attractive. Positive word of mouth quickly amplified the effectiveness of the initial marketing campaign, encouraging repeat viewings and attracting viewers who had not attended during opening weekend. One particularly successful aspect of the campaign involved appealing simultaneously to nostalgia and modern audiences. Older viewers recognized the title from Universal's classic monster library, while younger audiences saw exciting action sequences resembling contemporary adventure films. This dual appeal allowed the movie to attract multiple generations without alienating either group. As the film became a commercial success, the marketing naturally shifted towards celebrating audience enthusiasm. Television commercials and newspaper advertisements increasingly highlighted strong box office performance and positive audience reactions. This strategy reinforced the perception that The Mummy had become one of the must-see movies of the summer, encouraging undecided viewers to experience the phenomenon for themselves. Home video marketing further extended the film's popularity after its theatrical release. VHS and later DVD editions featured attractive cover artwork emphasizing the film's adventure rather than horror elements. Special features including deleted scenes, behind-the-scenes documentaries, visual effects breakdowns, production commentaries, and interviews provided additional value for fans. These releases introduced the movie to entirely new audiences while encouraging existing fans to revisit the adventure repeatedly. Looking back today, the marketing campaign is often praised because it accurately represented the film audiences ultimately experienced. Rather than misleading viewers through deceptive advertising, Universal successfully communicated the movie's unique blend of action, comedy, romance, horror, and fantasy. Expectations established by trailers and posters matched the tone of the final product remarkably well, contributing to the overwhelmingly positive audience response. Ultimately, the promotional campaign for The Mummy serves as an excellent example of blockbuster marketing done correctly. Every trailer, poster, interview, television commercial, magazine feature, merchandise line, and home video release reinforced the same central message: This was not simply a remake of an old horror movie but a thrilling modern adventure filled with unforgettable characters, spectacular action, ancient mysteries, and timeless entertainment. The campaign successfully built anticipation before release, sustained interest through positive audience reactions, and helped establish The Mummy as one of the defining cinematic adventures of its generation, ensuring that its legacy would continue long after its initial theatrical run. One of the reasons The Mummy continues to be celebrated decades after its release is that it successfully combines ideas from many different cinematic traditions while creating an identity that feels entirely its own. It draws inspiration from classic monster movies, adventure serials, historical epics, fantasy films, and treasure hunting adventures. Yet it never feels like a simple imitation of any one source. Instead, it carefully blends familiar influences into a unique experience that balances action, horror, comedy, romance, and mythology. Comparing The Mummy to similar films, earlier adaptations, and other works by director Stephen Sommers helps explain why it has remained one of the most enduring adventure movies of the modern era. The most obvious comparison is with the original The Mummy released in 1932. Starring Boris Karloff as Imhotep, the original film was one of Universal Pictures' legendary classic monster movies alongside Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, and The Wolf Man. That version focused primarily on gothic horror, slow-building suspense, and tragic romance. The atmosphere was quiet, mysterious, and emotionally restrained, relying heavily on shadow, silence, and psychological tension rather than large-scale action. The 1999 version takes a dramatically different approach. Stephen Sommers retained the central idea of an ancient priest returning from the dead because of forbidden love, but almost every other aspect of the story was reimagined. Instead of emphasizing horror above all else, the remake transforms the concept into an action-adventure epic filled with treasure hunts, sword fights, gun battles, supernatural disasters, and humorous character interactions. While the original aimed to frighten audiences through mystery, the remake seeks to entertain through excitement and spectacle. Despite these differences, both films share important thematic similarities. Each explores the consequences of obsession, forbidden love, immortality, and humanity's fascination with ancient civilizations. Imhotep remains a tragic figure in both versions, driven by love yet ultimately destroyed by his refusal to accept death. This shared emotional foundation allows the modern film to honor its predecessor while confidently establishing its own identity. Perhaps the comparison most frequently made by audiences is between The Mummy and the Indiana Jones series. Similarities are immediately apparent. Both feature adventurous heroes, archaeological discoveries, ancient artifacts, hidden temples, supernatural forces, dangerous traps, and exotic locations. Both also combine humor with action while celebrating old-fashioned adventure storytelling inspired by classic serial films. However, important differences distinguish the two franchises. Indiana Jones focuses primarily on historical relics and archaeological exploration grounded in real-world history, with supernatural elements appearing more selectively. The Mummy embraces fantasy from the very beginning, allowing curses, resurrected priests, magical books, and mythical creatures to become central components of the narrative. Indiana Jones often emphasizes individual heroism and academic curiosity, whereas The Mummy places greater importance on teamwork, romance, and supernatural mythology. Rick O'Connell also differs significantly from Indiana Jones as a protagonist. Indiana Jones is both scholar and adventurer, combining intellectual expertise with physical courage. Rick, by contrast, begins as a professional soldier and survivor with little academic knowledge. He depends upon Evelyn's intelligence just as she depends upon his combat experience. This equal partnership becomes one of the defining characteristics that separates The Mummy from many earlier adventure films. Another useful comparison can be made with Romancing the Stone, released in 1984. Like The Mummy, that film blends romance, comedy, and adventure while pairing two very different personalities who gradually fall in love during a dangerous expedition. Both stories rely heavily on character chemistry rather than constant action alone. However, Romancing the Stone remains largely grounded in reality, whereas The Mummy expands into large-scale supernatural fantasy involving ancient magic and mythical creatures. The film also shares similarities with Raiders of the Lost Ark in its treatment of ancient power. Both movies suggest that forgotten civilizations possessed forces beyond modern understanding. Characters who pursue ancient artifacts out of greed or arrogance often face devastating consequences. However, while Raiders focuses on biblical mythology, The Mummy builds its entire narrative around Egyptian mythology, allowing ancient religion and supernatural curses to shape nearly every aspect of the story. Jurassic Park offers another interesting comparison despite belonging to a completely different genre. Both films revive ancient dangers through modern curiosity. In Jurassic Park, extinct dinosaurs return through scientific experimentation. In The Mummy, ancient evil returns through archaeological exploration. In both cases, humanity's desire to uncover the past leads to catastrophic consequences. Each story also balances suspense, wonder, humor, and action while emphasizing that certain forces should be approached with caution and respect. Comparisons with Pirates of the Caribbean are particularly interesting because that franchise appeared several years after The Mummy. Both films combine supernatural mythology with swashbuckling adventure, memorable villains, spectacular visual effects, and humorous protagonists. Many viewers have noted that Rick O'Connell and Captain Jack Sparrow represent very different interpretations of the adventure hero. Rick succeeds through courage, loyalty, and determination, while Jack relies primarily on deception, improvisation, and unpredictability. Both approaches proved enormously popular, but they create distinctly different emotional experiences. The Mummy also influenced later adventure films such as National Treasure, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Jungle Cruise, Uncharted, and various fantasy adventures that blended historical mysteries with large-scale action. Although each possesses its own identity, many adopt similar storytelling rhythms involving treasure hunts, ancient legends, charismatic heroes, and rapidly escalating danger. The success of The Mummy demonstrated that audiences remained enthusiastic about classic adventure stories when presented with modern filmmaking techniques. Within Stephen Sommers' own career, The Mummy represents the culmination of creative ideas he had explored previously. His earlier film Deep Rising also combined horror, comedy, and action while featuring Kevin J. O'Connor in a prominent supporting role. Although Deep Rising achieved only modest commercial success, it demonstrated Sommers' ability to balance multiple genres within a single narrative. The Mummy refined this approach, creating a far more polished and emotionally satisfying experience. Sommers later directed The Mummy Returns and Van Helsing, both of which expanded his fascination with classic monsters and supernatural mythology. While these films contained ambitious action sequences and impressive visual effects, many audiences felt they lacked the elegant balance achieved by The Mummy. The original film carefully alternates excitement, suspense, humor, and emotional development, whereas some viewers believed later projects emphasized spectacle more heavily than character relationships. Another significant comparison involves the treatment of villains. Many adventure films feature antagonists motivated primarily by conquest, wealth, or world domination. Imhotep stands apart because his primary motivation originates from love. Although his methods become increasingly monstrous, audiences understand the emotional source of his actions. This tragic dimension creates a more layered antagonist than many contemporary action films offered, allowing viewers to experience both fear and sympathy simultaneously. The film's balance of genres also distinguishes it from many competitors. Horror movies often maintain relentless tension, while action films frequently prioritize constant spectacle. Romantic adventures sometimes slow their pace to emphasize emotional relationships. The Mummy successfully combines all these approaches without allowing any single genre to dominate the experience. This remarkable tonal balance remains one of its greatest achievements and one of the reasons it continues to attract new audiences. Modern blockbuster filmmaking has changed considerably since 1999. Many contemporary adventure films rely on interconnected cinematic universes, extended mythology, or serialized storytelling across multiple installments. The Mummy, by contrast, tells a complete and satisfying story within a single film while still leaving room for future adventures. This self-contained narrative structure has become increasingly appreciated by audiences seeking stories with clear beginnings, satisfying conclusions, and emotionally complete character arcs. The movie also differs from many modern productions in its reliance on practical filmmaking. While it certainly employed groundbreaking digital effects, these were carefully integrated with real locations, physical sets, practical makeup, elaborate costumes, and traditional stunt work. As a result, many viewers believe The Mummy has aged more gracefully than some later films that depended almost entirely on computer-generated environments. Audience comparisons over the years have consistently reinforced one conclusion. Very few films have successfully recreated the unique combination of ingredients that made The Mummy special. Numerous productions have attempted to imitate its blend of adventure, humor, romance, mythology, and spectacle, yet few have achieved the same level of balance. The chemistry between Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, Jerry Goldsmith's unforgettable score, Stephen Sommers' energetic direction, and the film's carefully structured screenplay combine in a way that has proven remarkably difficult to duplicate. Perhaps the strongest evidence of The Mummy's uniqueness came with the release of the 2017 reboot. Despite modern technology, a significantly larger budget, and contemporary filmmaking techniques, many audiences felt the newer version lacked the charm, warmth, humor, and emotional connection that defined the 1999 film. Rather than replacing the earlier adaptation, the reboot reminded viewers just how special Stephen Sommers' interpretation had always been. Fans repeatedly returned to the original because it delivered something timeless that could not be recreated simply through larger action scenes or more advanced visual effects. Ultimately, The Mummy occupies a unique place in cinematic history. It honors the legacy of Universal's classic monsters while embracing the spirit of Indiana Jones, the excitement of swashbuckling adventure, the mystery of archaeological exploration, the emotion of romantic storytelling, and the spectacle of modern blockbuster filmmaking. Instead of becoming overshadowed by the films that inspired it or the productions that followed, it established its own enduring identity. More than 25 years after its release, The Mummy remains not only one of the greatest adventure films ever made but also the standard by which many later adventure movies continue to be measured.